I was elbow deep in the engine of my '89 Camaro when my wife Marla walked into the garage, her heels clicking against the oil-stained concrete like a countdown timer. She was overdressed for a Tuesday evening. Black dress, fresh makeup, hair that screamed, "I spent 2 hours at the salon today." "I'm going on a business trip with Brett tomorrow," she announced, setting down a suitcase that could have housed a small family. I didn't look up from the carburetor. "Tell Brett I hope he closes the deal." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, fixing the only thing in my life that didn't cheat on me, while my wife packed lingerie for what she called a business conference. When your wife packs Victoria's Secret for a real estate seminar, she's either planning to seduce a client or starring in a really bad porno. Guess which one I got lucky with? It's just 2 days, Tom. The Henderson property deal is huge for the agency. Sure it is. I finally looked up, wiping grease on an old rag. 2 days at the Sunset Pines Business Hotel with your boss. Very professional. Her eyes flashed, that guilty look she got when I caught her in smaller lies. Like when she said she was working late, but came home smelling like wine and cologne that definitely wasn't mine. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, honey. Just making conversation. She huffed and grabbed her suitcase. Sometimes I think you don't trust me. Sometimes I think you're right. After she left, I cracked open a beer and called my best friend Mick. He owned Murphy's Tavern downtown, the kind of place where everyone knew your business before you did. "She's cheating," I said without preamble. "No shit, Sherlock. Half the town's been talking about it for weeks. You're the only one who didn't know." That stung. Being the last to know your wife screwing her boss is like being the last to know your house is on fire. By the time you smell the smoke, everything's already burned down. I need proof. What kind of proof? The kind that'll make her squirm when I file for divorce. Mick chuckled. "You know Sam, that kid who waits tables at Sunset Pines? He owes me money. Might be willing to work it off." Sam was 22, ambitious, and morally flexible. Exactly what I needed. For $200, he agreed to keep his eyes and ears open during Marla and Brett's business trip. The first text came Thursday morning. They're in the penthouse suite. Ordered champagne at 10 a.m. Very businesslike. The second, found her earring in his bedsheets when I cleaned the room. Also, the walls aren't that thick. The third included a photo that made my blood run cold and hot at the same time. Marla and Brett, half naked, caught through a cracked hotel door. Her legs wrapped around his waist, his hands tangled in her hair. "Proof enough for you, Chief?" Sam texted. "Yeah. Now keep your mouth shut until I say otherwise." I stared at the photo for a long time, sitting in my garage with a beer getting warm in my hand. 22 years of marriage, reduced to a grainy cell phone picture of my wife's betrayal. The funny thing about catching your spouse cheating, you think you'll be devastated. Instead, I felt liberated, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't know existed until it was gone. When Marla came home Friday night, she was glowing, satisfied. She kissed my cheek and told me all about the successful negotiations while I nodded and smiled and planned her destruction. "Brett's such a professional," she gushed. "Really knows how to handle difficult situations." "I bet he does." She missed the sarcasm completely. Cheaters always think they're smarter than everyone else. It's their fatal flaw. The Riverside Community BBQ was this Saturday, the kind of small-town event where everyone showed up to see and be seen. Perfect for what I had planned. I spent Friday night preparing. Sam had recorded some of their hotel room negotiations on his phone, audio only, but crystal clear. Marla's voice, breathless and eager. "Brett, you're amazing." My husband could never make me feel like this. Brett's response, "Tom's a loser. Always has been. You deserve better." Listening to it made me want to put my fist through a wall. Instead, I transferred the audio to my phone and practiced my timing. Saturday morning, Marla spent 2 hours getting ready. "It's important for the agency that we look professional," she said, applying lipstick in the mirror. "Absolutely. Wouldn't want Brett to be embarrassed by his favorite employee. She shot me a look but didn't respond. At the BBQ, I watched them work the crowd. Brett, 53 and trying to look 40, in his tight polo shirt and designer jeans. Marla laughing too loudly at his jokes, touching his arm every chance she got. They thought they were subtle. Mrs. Crabtree, our 70-year-old neighbor and the town's unofficial gossip coordinator, sidled up to me at the beer table. "Those two aren't fooling anyone," she whispered. "What do you mean?" "Please. I've seen more chemistry between a priest and a nun. Everyone knows they're carrying on." "Everyone?" "Honey, in a town this size, secrets have a half-life of about 15 minutes. That's when I realized the truth. I wasn't the last to know. I was the only one who mattered who didn't know. There's a difference. The BBQ had a PA system for announcements. I volunteered to help with the sound equipment, claiming I had experience from high school. While the mayor droned on about community spirit, I connected my phone to the system. Brett was giving Marla a very unprofessional back rub near the dessert table when I pressed play. Marla's voice, amplified across the entire park. "Brett, you're amazing in bed." My husband suspects nothing. He's too stupid to figure it out. The crowd went silent. Every conversation stopped. 200 people turned to stare at Brett and Marla, who had gone white as sheets. Brett's voice followed. "Tom's always been a loser. When we're together, I feel sorry for you having to go home to that pathetic excuse for a man." The audio continued for 30 seconds, long enough for everyone to understand exactly what they were hearing. Long enough for Brett's wife Linda to drop her plate of potato salad and storm toward the parking lot. Long enough for my in-laws to stare at their daughter in complete horror. I walked calmly to the microphone and turned off the recording. "Sorry, folks. Technical difficulties. Someone must have left their phone connected to the system." Marla was crying. Brett was red-faced and furious. The crowd was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. Brett cornered me in the parking lot as I loaded folding chairs into my truck. "You son of a bitch. You planned this." I smiled. "Prove it." "I'll destroy you." "With what? Your stellar reputation? Your happy marriage? Your job security?" I laughed. "If you wanted me to keep quiet, you should have kept your mouth shut. And your pants on." He took a swing at me. I ducked, and he stumbled into my truck's tailgate, scraping his knuckles. "Careful, Brett. Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself. That would be tragic." The fallout was immediate and spectacular. By Monday morning, the whole town knew every dirty detail. Brett's wife, Linda, filed for divorce. The real estate agency's owner, a deeply religious man named Paul Henderson, called an emergency meeting. Marla came home that evening in tears. Paul fired me. He said I was morally incompatible with the agency's values. "That's terrible," I said, not looking up from my newspaper. "Maybe Brett can help you find another job." "Brett's been suspended pending an investigation. His wife cleaned out their bank accounts. Sounds like you both made some poor choices." She stared at me. "You did this. You planned the whole thing. I played a recording that someone left on the PA system. If you don't like what you heard, maybe you shouldn't have said it." "Tom, please. We need to talk about this." "No, we really don't." I stood up and handed her an envelope. "Divorce papers, filed that morning. You can keep the house. I already took everything that mattered to me." Her face crumpled. 22 years of marriage, and this is how it ends? No, Marla. 22 years of marriage ended in a hotel room at Sunset Pines. This is just the paperwork. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Marla's affair had been so public, so documented, that her lawyer advised her to settle quickly. She got the house and half our savings. I got my freedom and my dignity back. But the real surprise came from our mutual friends, couples we'd known for decades who suddenly had opinions about my cruel handling of the situation. Jake and Susan Morrison invited me to dinner 3 weeks after the BBQ. I should have known it was an ambush. "Tom, we need to talk," Jake said over coffee. "What you did to Marla was vindictive." "What I did?" I exposed the truth. "You humiliated her in front of the entire town," Susan added. "That was unnecessarily cruel." I set down my cup carefully. She humiliated herself. I just provided the soundtrack. "She made a mistake," Jake continued. "People have affairs. It happens. But what you did was calculated revenge." "You're right. It was calculated and effective." "We can't support what you did," Susan said. "It goes against everything we believe about forgiveness and moving forward." Interesting perspective. "Tell me, when did you find out about the affair?" They exchanged glances. "We suspected for a few months," Jake admitted. "And you didn't think to mention it to me?" "It wasn't our place." I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. "So when my wife was cheating, it wasn't your place to tell me. But when I exposed her cheating, suddenly it's your place to judge me? That's not—" "Get out. Tom, please, get out of my house. Now." They left, and I never spoke to them again. Over the next month, I lost 6 couples from our friend group. All of them had known about the affair. All of them had chosen to protect Marla's secret rather than my dignity. The breaking point came at Murphy's Tavern 6 weeks later. I was having a quiet beer with Mick when Jake, Susan, and 4 other former friends walked in. They'd clearly been drinking elsewhere and decided to stage an intervention. "There he is," Jake announced loudly. "Tom the Terrible, destroyer of marriages." The bar went quiet. Mick stepped closer to me, but I waved him off. "Something you want to say, Jake?" "Yeah, I do. You're a vindictive bastard who destroyed a good woman over a simple mistake." "Simple mistake?" "She was screwing her boss for 6 months." "So what?" Susan slurred. "You think you're perfect? You think you never made mistakes in your marriage?" "I never cheated." "Maybe if you'd been a better husband, she wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere," said Carol Hendricks, another former friend. That's when something inside me snapped. "You want to know what kind of husband I was?" I stood up, facing all 6 of them. "I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for her real estate classes. I supported her career when it took off and mine stagnated. I attended every office party, every client dinner, every industry event she wanted me at. I was faithful, supportive, and devoted for 22 years. My voice was rising, but I didn't care. And when she decided to spread her legs for her boss, every single one of you knew about it. You saw me at barbecues and dinner parties making a fool of myself while my wife was making a fool of me, and you said nothing. You protected her secret and let me live in ignorance. We didn't want to hurt you," Jake protested. "You didn't want the drama. There's a difference. You were all happy to watch the show as long as you didn't have to get involved. But the minute I fought back, suddenly I'm the villain." I stepped closer to Jake, and he actually backed away. "You want to know what's vindictive?" "Vindictive is watching your friend's wife cheat and saying nothing. Vindictive is protecting the cheater and judging the victim. Vindictive is coming into my friend's bar to lecture me about my response to betrayal." "Tom, calm down," Susan said nervously. "No, I'm done being calm. I'm done being the nice guy who takes whatever life dishes out with a smile and a thank you. You all made your choice when you kept Marla's secret. Now live with the consequences." I finished my beer and set the empty bottle on the bar with deliberate care. "And if any of you ever speak to me again, if you so much as nod in my direction on the street, I'll make what I did to Marla look like a love letter. We clear?" They were clear. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I learned something that changed everything. Mrs. Crabtree, my elderly neighbor and source of all local intelligence, knocked on my door with a plate of cookies and a bombshell. "I thought you should know," she said, settling into my kitchen chair like she belonged there. "That Tina girl from Marla's office has been spreading some interesting stories." Tina Walsh had been Marla's closest friend at the real estate agency, her confidant, her supporter, her shoulder to cry on during the divorce. She'd publicly defended Marla and condemned my cruel revenge. What kind of stories? She's been telling people she orchestrated the whole thing. Says she encouraged Marla to have the affair, fed information to that boy at the hotel, even suggested Marla pack that fancy lingerie for the business trip. I set down my coffee cup. Why would she do that? Remember when you caught her skimming money from the Henderson construction account 5 years ago? She lost her job, couldn't find another one in real estate, had to move back in with her mother. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. I'd discovered Tina's embezzlement during a routine home inspection and reported it to Paul Henderson. She'd been fired, blacklisted from the industry, and publicly humiliated. I'd thought she'd moved away. She's been planning this for years, Mrs. Crabtree continued. Waited until she could hurt you the way you hurt her. But Marla was a willing participant who got played by an expert. Tina knew exactly which buttons to push, exactly how to make the affair seem like Marla's idea. I sat back in my chair, processing this revelation. My wife had been manipulated into cheating by someone seeking revenge against me. It didn't excuse her choices, but it explained the timing, the boldness, the almost deliberate carelessness of the affair. Where's Tina now? Still in town? Works at that new boutique on Main Street. Thinks she's untouchable because everyone feels sorry for her. I smiled for the first time in months. We'll see about that. The plan came together beautifully. I had 3 advantages. Tina thought she'd won, the town was tired of affair drama, and I had nothing left to lose. First, I visited Sam at the hotel. For another $200, he provided me with security footage from the week of Marla and Brett's tryst. The cameras had caught Tina meeting with Brett in the lobby 2 days before the trip, handing him something that looked suspiciously like a room key. Next, I had a conversation with Paul Henderson, the real estate agency owner. Paul was a good man who genuinely liked Marla and felt bad about firing her. When I showed him evidence that his former employee had been manipulated into the affair as part of an elaborate revenge scheme, his Christian forgiveness evaporated. That woman destroyed my agency's reputation, he said, studying the security footage. Caused 3 divorces and cost me 2 major clients. If she orchestrated this, she did, and she's been bragging about it. Paul's jaw tightened. What do you need from me? The final piece was Mick, who had connections throughout the town's business community. Within a week, we had testimony from 6 people who'd heard Tina boast about getting revenge on Tom, the perfect husband, by showing him what his precious wife was really like. The monthly town hall meeting was held at the community center, the same building where I'd attended PTA meetings, school plays, and charity auctions with Marla for 2 decades. Tonight, it would host my final performance in this small-town drama. I arrived early and set up my equipment. The same PA system I'd used at the BBQ, connected to my laptop instead of my phone. Paul Henderson was there, along with Mrs. Crabtree, and about 60 other residents who'd come for the usual municipal business. Tina walked in 20 minutes late, confident and smiling. She'd gained weight since losing her real estate job, but she carried herself like a woman who'd won a great victory. She nodded at me dismissively and took a seat in the front row. When the mayor called for new business, I stood up. I'd like to address some rumors that have been circulating about my divorce. A murmur ran through the crowd. The mayor looked uncomfortable but nodded for me to continue. 3 months ago, I exposed my wife's affair in what many of you considered a cruel and vindictive manner. Tonight, I want to share some information about how that affair actually started. I clicked a button on my laptop, and the security footage appeared on the projection screen. Tina, clear as day, handing Brett what was obviously a hotel key card. This is Tina Walsh, meeting with Brett Morrison 2 days before his business trip with my wife. She's handing him a key to the penthouse suite at Sunset Pines, a room she reserved and paid for under a fake name. Tina had gone pale, but she hadn't moved from her seat. I clicked again. Audio recording. Tina's voice speaking to someone on the phone. She's finally ready to make her move. I've been working on Marla for months, convincing her she deserves better than Tom. Brett's ego was easy to manipulate. Just had to make him think seducing her was his idea. The crowd was dead silent now. All eyes were on Tina, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. For those who don't remember, 5 years ago I discovered that Ms. Walsh was embezzling money from the Henderson construction account. She was fired, blacklisted from the real estate industry, and publicly humiliated. This affair, my wife's betrayal, Brett's suspension, 3 destroyed marriages, was her revenge against me. I clicked one final time. Another audio recording, this one from just 2 weeks ago. The best part is, everyone thinks Tom is the villain. He destroyed his own marriage trying to get back at his cheating wife, never knowing I was pulling the strings the whole time. Perfect revenge. Tina finally found her voice. That's not, you can't what? Expose the truth? Isn't that what you did to me? She stood up, shaking. You ruined my life. You embezzled money. I reported a crime. You destroyed 3 marriages for revenge. I'm reporting that too. The crowd erupted. People were shouting, some at Tina, some at me, some at each other. Mrs. Crabtree was nodding approvingly. Paul Henderson looked like he wanted to strangle Tina with his bare hands. But I wasn't finished. I want everyone here to understand something, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. I'm not the victim in this story. I stopped being the victim the day I decided to fight back. Marla made her choices, Brett made his, and Tina made hers. I'm just the guy who refused to suffer in silence. I looked directly at Tina, who was crying now. You wanted to destroy my marriage? Congratulations, you succeeded. But you forgot something important. When you have nothing left to lose, you have everything to gain. I packed up my laptop and walked toward the exit. At the door, I turned back one final time. Oh, and Tina? The boutique owner got an interesting phone call this afternoon about your little revenge confession. Something about not wanting employees who manipulate and destroy families for personal satisfaction. I hear there's a nice opening at the gas station on Route 9. Night shift, minimum wage. Perfect for someone with your skill set. As I walked out of the community center, I could hear the crowd behind me demanding answers from Tina, who was sobbing and trying to explain herself to people who no longer cared to listen. Outside, the autumn air was crisp and clean. I took a deep breath and smiled. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. They'd all underestimated me. Marla, Brett, Tina, even our so-called friends. They saw a nice guy, a pushover, someone who would take whatever life handed him with a smile and a thank you. They were wrong. I climbed into my truck and drove home, where my restored Camaro was waiting in the garage. Tomorrow, I'd start looking for a new place to live, maybe in a bigger city where nobody knew my story. Tonight, I'd have a beer and enjoy the silence. The last laugh, as it turned out, was mine after all.